Пожалуйста, поприветствуйте Mirjam Struppek.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, basically I will start with the presentation, and then Susa, my colleague, will continue for the next half an hour. So I will give first a bit an introduction how basically how this work around moving images in public spaces started. Like in 2005, I was asked to curate a conference around this issue because they wanted to put up this art program on this kind of typical ordinary LED screen that at that time you could find basically as moving image object in the city. So I was of course it was predetermined with advertisement. So for us it was working on a redefinition of a growing infrastructure and trying to discover the potential of these screens for urban society and cultural content. So in this first conference, actually, we had two speakers that were from Russia. So already at that time, Russia was basically involved in this discourse. This was a project by Fred Fröhlich here in Moscow, who made this art piece consisting of 25 Russian words with exclusively positive connotations as well as numerical values. So basically he was reflecting on this new consumer society happening that happiness is stamped by a price. So I think a very nice piece reflecting about, of course, these screens that are mainly used for advertisement. Then out of the conference, we invited these, actually the commercial part side of this whole issue, like this magazine called Screens.ru, which represents, let's say, behind there is a company that sells actually these screens, and so they actually then collaborated with the artist that was present at the conference, and they brought in the Out Video Festival stock show to Moscow, where the citizens could interact with these portable backpack screen. And however, then Susa and me, we wanted to bring this conference also to Berlin, because we both lived in Berlin at that time. But we soon found out that actually this type of billboards are not the thing that represents Berlin. So that's why finally we called it Media-facades Festival. And this is a wonderful example, because when we try to look for partners for the Media-facades festivals, we also ask the owners of this LED screen, you will wonder, LED screen? And actually they answered us, oh, sorry, you're coming too late. We really don't know what to do with this screen, because actually it is so bad positions that nobody looks at the screen. So now you have the result. This is how it looks today. So for me, this is the symbol that this type of screen is really out of date. So let's more talk about media facades, like more integrated ideas of moving images in the architecture. So in this festival, we intentionally worked with the 22 local artists, because we wanted to work very site-specific and also participatory. And this, of course, more difficult if the artists don't know, if they maybe cannot speak the language, and so if they come from somewhere else. But also in these festivals where we worked with 4 very different facades, we really explored how it matters, the location around the screen, but also the business models that are behind the owners and the purpose of these screens. We had one cultural screen, one that was more like a screen installed by SAP to, let's say, represent or give an image of the company in a very hip new area to have a good image, representing a good image. And then these two screens, they were just exactly very newly built, basically for advertisement. This one, the O2 World, for announcing programs and of course also advertisement. Later I will show a few videos, and also Susa will have images of projects that were involved here. And the follow-up, we jumped on the next level. So we were, instead of focusing on the local, like thinking about how can the technology connect cities. So we collaborated with 7 cities, 33 art projects, and 20 different screens as well. Like I will, if you're interested, because it's a lot of art projects, so I can't present all of them now. You can look on the website media-facades EU, and we have documented all of them of both festivals. And basically now, and Susa will talk later more about this, out of these first connections with the different art institutions in these countries is like developing through the Connecting Cities project that Susa is in the moment working on, like a stronger exchange among these institutions, because the production of content, of cultural content, is of course always a thing that is very expensive. So it's very much about sharing infrastructure and sharing as well content. So basically, looking all the years back now, we can really say like culturally used screens and media facades are a global phenomenon. Like, but still the challenge remains because it's a very complex medium, how to curate it. And let's say, just for you to get an image, like I put together a few very different types of usage for cultural use and type of screens all around the world. So one thing you find is these, of course, these large temporary screen hubs that are used mainly for cinema or soccer or any kinds of sports events. But also we have a number of examples where a big screen is permanently connected to a beautiful square, so which is like, in a sense, I always say, like the living room of the city, where people sit in front of the TV and watch together, because it's more nice to watch together than alone. Then, of course, we have this phenomenon of architectural icons, where cultural institutions are using media facades to have, let's say, a window to show their art pieces to the public. And then we have this type of small-scale networked screens for a very mixed program between local information, culture, and, of course, also advertisement. Then we have especially commissioned artistic screen sculptures that are popping up more and more. Then we have, like as a contrast to the commercial screens, we have the small-scale guerrilla projections or very mobile interventions that, of course, are much more easy to realize than these mega temporary architectural mapping projects, which are amazing but also extremely expensive because you need huge projectors. If you have ever wanted to do something, you know how hard it is to get financing for this. And then we have air screens in all our pockets, and maybe in the future also in our glasses, who knows. And actually, who knows, if everybody runs around with the whatever augmented reality glasses, maybe we don't need media facades anymore, because we just look through our glasses and we can see the city how we want to see it. So basically the digital conquered to a certain point. Of course, we still have a very analog city. But like you probably know that also here in Russia there's this buzz around the smart city. Like for me it's the climax of really a wide spectrum of approaches, from business-oriented to more citizen-oriented ideas to connect media with the city, like ideas like hacked city, open source city, wiki city is of course, like the word says already, the idea is more coming from the citizen-oriented open idea, while things like intelligent city, pervasive city, fusion city, hybrid city, or especially smart city represent more, let's say, the market forces behind this idea to connect media and city. And all ideas to, of course, to stop the decay of our public spaces, like the fear was very strong in the 80s, 90s that our public space is decaying. So, of course, my background is an urban planner, so I always try to see these connections between the phenomenon of actually urban redevelopment and this urban media development. So, I believe, like with the issue, we all are citizens, so we need to ask what kind of public space do we want. Let me polarize a little bit. So on the one hand, I believe we have this business approach, like where basically the responsibility is taken away from the citizens, and like city becomes more an object of service for consumers. So like we find in the urban planning world, we find revitalization strategies, people talk about the event city of the creative class, or the festivalization of public space, or like the city becomes like the theater stage for the society of the spectacle. Like probably everybody knows the writings of Guy Debord about, he was warning already about this focus on spectacles. And of course also the safe, no risk controlled city of experiences and atmospheres that are mostly represented, of course, by the shopping mall. And like when I studied urban planning, like years ago, the big buzzword was city marketing. Like in the, of course, it's like cities have to look at locational factors and be the tourist attraction, and like in this competition of big global cities. And I actually think we have to ask ourselves, like. These beautiful mega mappings and huge media facades, aren't they actually a part of this machinery of advertisement and passive entertainment and spectacles? I mean, they're truly impressive, but how do we feel if we stand there? Do we feel like involved, or do we feel just amazed? And in our festival that I'm just working on, Screen City Festival, of course, we were confronted with this idea because our focus was like citizen participation. But you realize, like, the newspaper, they are reporting about this. So we were thinking, okay, we have this as a strategy to catch the people and then try also to bring them to look at other things that we think is a bit more what we think what is about culture in public space. This is another interesting example that we encountered during the Media-facades Festival 2008. Actually, this was like the O2 World opening, where during the opening they played the music of Rammstein, and they put this text basically saying built for power, places for heroes, space for victory, world happening location, which already is like, of course, a very symbolic thing to present at your opening. And this actually is located in a district that is very much in danger of gentrification. So there was a huge demonstration against this. So the media facade became the symbol of the whole redevelopment of this area that was called the so-called Mediaspree, like it should be the future media city of Berlin. And so it's, in a sense, it's very interesting because this media facade with this triggered a discourse, or at least became a place where people expressed their opinions, even though they couldn't access the facade. So, of course, also our artists were thinking, because we got from the owners actually, I think, 15 minutes per day. So, which for our festival, let's say per day, 15 minutes. And it's running the whole evening almost, so we thought, what can we do with it? And actually, we were surprised. We put some quite radical things on the facades, and probably we think they probably didn't really care, so they didn't notice what the artist put. So here I come to let's say the other side of citizen approach to rediscovering a lively city, which is of course in the direction of urban planning. You have the neighborhood management, like process-oriented architectural urban experiments, or just then all the cultural initiatives of interventions, temporary or social sculptures. And like these, then also on the other hand, like guerrilla actions became actually established, or graffiti became an art, a way of art expression. And like we can sum it up like with this word of reclaim the streets again. And of course we try to reflect this a bit with our art projects to ask ourselves, can urban media be a tool for an inclusive living laboratory, like stimulating tolerance, local collaboration and interaction? So here in this project, for example, the artists worked with people in the neighborhood and asked them, who is your hero? And then out of the answers, they made these figures, and then they involved the people themselves. By dancing, they could animate their figures that they all together created together. I have a little video that basically will, they're very brief explanation of these four projects. So you can, it's probably better to see some moving images than just the photos. Let me see.
One individual person's inner world shown on the outside.
You're gonna have to think how your animal moves when it's happy, how it moves when it's sad, how it moves when it attacks, you know?
Maybe it's not obvious to the eye, but we want to make it obvious to the eye.
What I did for the media facades is I actually opened the existing space and showed something that's behind it, although in fact it's a fake. It is the building from the inside, but it's not what you would actually see if you would look through the window. So I think the cleaning women who are in the public space, in fact, but always not visible, I wanted to give them a visibility that they normally don't have in a public space. I think it is important when one does a project in public space, it has to be something that is readable in a matter of a couple of seconds.
We are a kind of fictive advertisement company. We are going to the streets and we try to find people who want to advertise for whatever they want to.
Of course, they stand on the street and they stand in the public and other people passing by. And so they make a little demonstration on the street, and then their little demonstration on the street goes on the screen.
We're an agency on a mission, and we're on the mission to give the public space in front of public screens back to public.
that's just a little abstract. On our website you find a much longer video about selected art projects. Okay, I go back. Okay, so really, I think we have to ask ourselves, what kind of future screen city do we want? Or do we want to be citizens, users, or consumers? And I think to become real citizens, art and art festivals should help to think, to inform, to inspire, to connect, to co-create, to be political, to participate, and to share experiences. So I think it's in our hands. And now Susa will tell a bit more about the network that really tries to connect and art institutions to support each other to change a little bit our urban environment.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm also very happy to be here in Moscow. It's my second time, and I think there is something which goes together here. My name is Susa Pop. My background is I'm a designer and an artist, and later I made postgraduate studies in European cultural management. And I founded Public Art Lab in 2003. It is a network of different experts, urban planners, architects, curators, and we all together we collaborate depending on the projects. So we are project funded, non-governmental, non-commercial association, and our main projects, what we are doing, what it already says, public art. We realize public art projects in the public space with new technologies. Okay. Okay, I already see some other pictures. Just a moment. Why I'm not connected? System. Okay, now it's okay. Good. Maybe, yeah. Okay, here we are. Yes. And most of the projects, what we do or what we did, like these early projects, mobile projects, nomadic projects, traveling to different cities, are networked. So we always collaborate with other curators, institutions, and all the curators, how can I say, are responsible for their own cities, for their own local program, but together we co-curate a program like a pool where everybody then creates program for his local context. This was with the mobile museums, mobile studios, but also later with media-facades festivals and the Connecting Cities Festival. It's the same principle. This works very well because everybody feels responsible for his own city, and it's extremely interesting to see the local context of every curator, artist, and city. So our two main questions are how to catalyze communication as a collective experience in the public space, and how to create participatory projects that contribute to local community building and translocal exchange. And so these are, how can I say, high words, and of course it's not so difficult, so easy. I think if you ask yourself, how do you create a participatory moment that others really, are involved in creative processes, that's a long story, and it has a lot to do, of course, with audience development, and I hope I can give you some kind of, share some experience with you in this little talk. Media-facades Festival, Mirjam already mentioned. Maybe I show this picture because for us it was extremely important to have this visual. You maybe all know the Blinken Lights projects from 2001. This house, des Lehrers, was empty at this time, and Chaos Computer Club, they celebrated, I think, the 30th anniversary, and within 1 week they decided to use this empty house, des Lehrers, and transform it into a media facade, just with simple construction lamps, and you could send their SMS, and and it was really a community platform for the people. Everybody went there, and they couldn't believe it was in 2000. And so, because often we have been asked by the press, Ms. Pop, what is an urban screen or what is a media facade? And we hardly could explain what it is, but with this visual, everybody immediately understood what it is, because this project was really very famous in Berlin at those time, and very important for the question what Mirjam already mentioned, what we wanted to explore. And also then for the upcoming Networked Media Facades Festival in 2010. So it was important at this time to find out that this media facade is a kind of membrane between the digital worlds and the public space. So through the internet, of course, it is operated through the internet. You can create a lot of internet processing projects, and of course with certain interfaces, interaction technologies, you can include the people into creative processes. I think in total, meanwhile, we realized around 90 or 100 projects, and we are still in the period of urban prototyping. Every artist builds his own interface. So there were breathing belts, which the people have been connected to the media facade, EEG helmets, even 2 people connected in 2 cities with EEG helmets. There are a lot of possibilities. And we can say, so the main potentials of these whole issue of media facades is community building. Mirjam already showed a lot of good examples to include the people into a participatory process with a media facade, connecting cities to bring them beyond the borders into exchange, and sensing the city. This is the whole idea about data visualization, what I'm going to talk later. So there was a certain necessity to go on with this whole project. Therefore, we initiated this urban media network for connecting cities, which is now running for 4 years, and go deeper into this whole idea of the networked city, participatory city, and the visible city. So at this point, I'm also going to show you a video, and just a moment, which on one hand shows the whole infrastructure of so just a moment. Now it disappeared. Here it is. Yeah, this network, these are mainly how can I say, media facades holders that run a screen as a community platform. Some of them are also screens holders, and with a permanent program. Some of them show a temporary program on an infrastructure, which is mainly commercial. And here you see a kind of overview of the partners. We in Berlin, for example, we have a temporary infrastructure, also in Brussels. So we use the existing infrastructure and show art projects there, or we create our own do-it-yourself infrastructure with real projections on window, or like these houses layers, what we have shown. If there is no media facade, then very often the partners use projections. And here, for example, in Istanbul, you also see a commercial screen that was equipped with interaction technologies. And here some of the partners who have integrated LED screen or also projection window in their existing building. Ars Electronica Center is maybe one of the most famous ones, what you might know, with the Ars Electronica Festival every autumn, and which is now existing for 30 years. And also this city screen for Media Lab Prado. It is supported by the city government and run by Media Lab Prado, which is a very interesting Media Lab hub. And Montreal. Montreal is a city planning project, we can say, because it has 10 permanent projection walls all over the city. There is this project called Quartier des Spectacles, which, yes, they decided to to put permanent infrastructure there. Also São Paulo, a brand new media facade in the Avenida de Paulista, which only shows artist projects, and yes, lots of them have the possibility to include the public audience. And of course, then also we have been curating the Bauhaus Festival, and here we invited connecting cities to the Bauhaus Festival, to a small city in Germany, in Dessau, and have been, yes, connected Dessau with other cities from this network, which was a very interesting experience for the inhabitants, of course. And here some of these city visions of which I have been talking. Networked city. What is meanwhile famous is the SMS slingshot, which we have shown for the first time in 2010. You could SMS send messages in this kind of, yes, urban activism tool, catapulted on the media facade, and on the other side, in this case Liverpool, they answered with the same device. Also interesting, of course, is public gaming. I think you all know the famous Tetris game. Here Berlin is playing against Madrid, and they could watch each other, how they were playing, and yes, moving virtually the stones on the screen. And another interesting network scenario is Ready to Cloud. The people were tracked through a Kinect camera and projected into the cloud, and at the same time there was another actor jumping into the cloud from another city. So this was a network scenario between Dessau and Liverpool. Binoculars. You did not watch into your own city, but into other cities. You could choose the city, and your eye was tracked and also protected in the public space of the city. And here we have the famous artist Jeremy Bailey, who is a telepresent artist sitting in his office in Toronto, talking through the slaves, and his face, you see, it was an iPad through which he was talking to the people in Dessau and in Brussels and Liverpool. And participatory issue is about, yes, going to the neighborhoods, talking with the people, including them, and bringing them to the media facade or including them in a projection. Mirjam had already shown this nice project of Giants of the Hoods, where the people could choose their avatar, and in the evening, yes, they could meet and dance together. Or Dance AR, which is an application and which invited the people to a kind of flash mob choreography. So with this app, they were moving, and of course, when everybody used the same app, they were simultaneously moving to this application. Yes, of course, here is an interesting project of Istanbul artists who used an app for a kind of, how can I say, opinion building tool. They were asking questions, and by answering these questions, they were represented by a color and shown on a media facade. This is, I think, one of the most famous projects, Hands from Above. Here you see how the screen is already becoming a third space. And here the same, so the people in the place were playing against a figure, a virtual figure on the screen. Yeah, and of course then you can use it for, we had it here at the opening of the Media Facades Festival 2010, where we invited all our guests and friends and artists to be connected with the rear projection window of the Collegium Hungaricum with the other cities, and which was there was a similar event, not a dinner like this, but maybe a party, but they were connected the whole evening with these other cities. Visible city is the other topic what we are exploring next year. Good example is City Sleeplight of Antoine Schmidt. The artist used open data sources, and he was exploring the rhythm, the sleeping rhythm of the city through data of transport, illumination, bank transaction, and out of them he created this pulsing light and projected it back into the urban space. And this is the project Men in Grey with Julian Oliver. And what did they use? They appeared like in a futuristic scenario and captured how can I say, the people who were sitting online here, they captured their data and were shown it on the suitcases and on the public screens. So these are all the partners. We also have Arte Creative as partner. If you go to their platform, you can see a portrait of all the artists with which we have been working in 2013. And also, of course, this website I would also recommend you to. There is a newsletter to subscribe there, and because there is now a big community who is who subscribed and who is involved in this whole topic. So I come back to my presentation. With this Connecting Cities network, we saw a certain necessity to go on and really to open up this theme to a worldwide scene, because we saw that a lot of media facades holders and curators are very much interested in this topic. And of course, all together, we can share the experience, we can share the projects. This is also one very important element. These urban media projects, if you curate them and produce them, it's not so easy, because on one hand they should be accessible to the public immediately so that they can understand what is going on. On the other hand, they should include them into a participatory element, but of course they should be also have a certain critical, relevant social aspect. And so therefore it's for us important that these artist projects circulate on a networked infrastructure, that they are not only shown once, but of course much more often in this, within this Connecting Cities network. Then, of course, also to open and use these media facades infrastructures for future visions of our cities, as they are a membrane between the digital worlds and the public space, and create a sustainable urban communication medium. So here I just switch. And also the network, which is growing. We have a lot of interesting partners who joined the network. And yes, so every year we have a call for proposal, and then together the curators of the cities, they select and produce around 15 artist projects. And here, for example, is the selection of 2013, which you already have seen, a part of it. And some of the highlights, of course, from the networked city in 2013 was to use the screen as a third space. Tele-encounters on the urban screen as a third space. This is a project what we are going to produce this year, but Paul Sermon, he's really famous and working for a long time with Charlotte Gold in this field. Here they had an urban picnic. 2 different venues met on the screen and were composed into one location. So of course sometimes it's very funny when you see the making of videos, how they were touching someone who is not sitting there next to you. But yeah, so on the screen they sit together, and he merges the 2 different physical venues. Also, this was an example for the third screen. And then, of course, we had a lot of mobile and ephemeral infrastructures, what you have seen. So, which were, small screens, which were going to the cities, like here, Jeremy Bailey and his Master Slave project, or the Ready to Cloud project. And next year with this participatory city, I just only point out these are all the projects which we are going to produce, and some interesting new aspects which came in were kind of, I would say, maker labs or science labs projects that take place in the urban space and use the media facade as a kind of community platform, or as a screen for showing a process that is taking place somewhere else. So, for example, here we have Susa Pop Urban Alphabets. This is an app where you go into the city and you take photos of letterings, and they could capture one letter, and so you can create your own urban alphabet. When you come back to the media facade, or we make it with a rear projection actually in Berlin, then you can write little letters or messages to your friends by using the urban alphabets of the neighborhoods. And so every city or every neighborhood has generates together with the artist their own alphabet. And also interesting, of course, is this human being project, which takes place together with schools and children. The artists, they built a model which has the size of a building on which a mapping will take place later. And into this model, this is a beehive where the queen beehive is now settled down, and they just started to build the honeycomb, and all this process is filmed, and there are also workshops together with children. And later this year, at the end of summer, we can show a whole media facade mapping showing the process how bees are building, their beehive. So a microcosmos process is shown on a huge media facade and has, of course, a very big educational aspect. And the last curatorial topic, Visible City, is about the data visualization. I like this sensing place, placing sense very much. It is of Dietmar Offenhuber, who was working for a long time for MIT Sensible City Lab and made a show at the Ars Electronica Center that had the title Sensing Place, Placing Sense, because it shows very well how all the data that is generated invisibly, without that we know it, through sensor networks and sensor technologies. Very often we are part in it, and like a passive, city dweller, we even don't know when we are tracked. And this shows very well the sentence, or this two words, sensing place. But placing sense turns it around and makes you to an active producer of data. And so there are lots of interesting crowdsourcing and do-it-yourself strategies. Maybe the most famous one is this Copenhagen wheel, where the people put a small sensor at their bicycle in Copenhagen, which measured the air pollution, and all together they generated the data of the air pollution of their city. So it's a crowdsourcing activity to generate the own data. Also to get invisible, like Mark Shepard did it with his survival kit. He created this underwear that immediately, when you get into contact with surveillance technologies like RFID, there will be a little, pulse on your underwear, on your body, and you will immediately know that you are now wearing a jacket that is equipped with an RFID chip. There was also recently I could not go there, but I heard of it, this DLI Summit Do-It-Yourself Festival in Moscow in April, at the end of April, and in an urban hackathon, also the people created do-it-yourself tools, how to protect themselves from, being tracked and being, followed or through surveillance technologies. And what they developed, for example, were these haircuts where you could not be anymore identified through these typical detection technologies. And also T-shirts. When they see you with this T-shirt, they think you are 5 persons and not only 1 person. This was very interesting, with really a lot of interesting designs. Open data, this was already an issue, what I explained. So to use open data sources and to create out of these open data sources new artistic scenarios. Here we have a waste-to-energy plant in Copenhagen, and 1 ton of CO2 emission is made visible through this huge smoke ring, a very archaic visualization of CO2 emission. We make a lot of workshops, meanwhile, how to curate urban media facades and what you have to really take into account. And we often say that, we have to be aware that it's always a medium of spectacle. If it is an advertising platform, or it is a city icon, which is normally, normally shows cultural content. It still remains a medium of spectacle. For example, when these projects have been funded by the European Union, for them it was extremely important that projects have a high visibility. And these media facades, of course, have a high visibility because, they are in the public space and they are huge infrastructures. And of course, you have to deal with a lot of different aspects. Mirjam mentioned already lots of them. What is the business model behind the media facades? And then all these technological aspects. If you want to create a networked scenario, the internet access, the internet connectivity, permissions, all I could go there, of course, much more deeper into these issues. But the most important, I think, is that the context is the medium. So we often say we have to start really from the location. The project should be site-specific or should have a site-specific context or site-related. And every venue is different, and you have to read and to decode and interact with the public space. So it's not only a physical space, but it is a space full of science and full of semiotics, which we have to read and understand. And then out of this, of course, we can create a really interesting art project. So like here, this sentence, every area is different. Business areas are different to shopping mall areas. Here, I just want to, I think all of you know Robert Venturi and his famous book, Learning from Las Vegas, where he made the study over years. And with his car and a camera on the car, he was taking photos all around Las Vegas. What you see here of different entrances, front, side, and back, and just started to compare them. And what he wanted to do, and where we then find again the whole issue of the passive and the active citizen and consumer, that if you are participating in a spectacle, of course you are a passive consumer, but if you are taking part in a kind of co-creating process, you become an active citizen. So we have these site specificity versus drop sculpture. This is a word that is often used in public art, which means a sculpture that just falls from the sky and has no relation to the audience and no relation to the context and the venue. And the construction of situations which should break the dominance of the spectacle. Mirjam already mentioned Guy Debord, who was, very influent, had a lot of influence and was, one of the main actors of the Situationist International. So if you have a look on this whole follow-up, how to develop an urban media art project, this would be a kind of plan. I will not go into more details, but from the context to the awareness, then you start to communicate about a small change in the urban, or in the daily perception, which with the communication starts a process of participation, which could lead to community building, identity building, connecting cities. So my last part now, another 5 minutes, and then we can start with a discussion, is what are we doing now if we have on one hand these cultural projects and on the other hand the companies who are much more and more interested in this whole area. Smart cities, Internet of Things, mobile media is the context of media facades. I always liked this very much, this picture. If you see in 2005, nobody had took a photo. This was when the selection of the Pope when he held his first speech. So, and here in 2013, everybody had a mobile phone. And what do you think if we have a world population of 7 billion people? Do you know how many have a subscribed contract? Is anybody having an idea? 7 billion people, world population. How many of them are having a mobile phone? What would you say? One? Every person? 1 million? Okay, okay. So 7 billion. Yeah. Sorry? 14 billion. So we have a world population of 7 billion people. And how many do you think have a subscribed? 14. So every 2 of them? Okay. Oh, wow, good. Yeah, so they are nearly 6 billion. So it's only missing 1 billion people who don't have a subscribed mobile phone contract. And of course, this is getting more and more interesting if we go back to this whole issue about advertising in our public spaces and campaigning. Because, yes, through this ubiquitous computing, you are online everywhere. And, the companies, of course, can create completely different marketing forms as they did before. So, for example, what we know are these lifestyle campaigns with mappings or with graffiti live illustrations or live paintings. I think everybody of them knows them. Maybe this I show later. This is one of the very few campaigns which is really interesting. But normally we have, very often companies contact us and say, oh, can you help us? We would like to, we are presenting our company on a fair and we would like to extend our brand experience into the public space. So we would like to show our brand on cabs or on bridges, little mobile projections. But with what they come is just their logo, just to show the logo. Yes, mobile projections or printed in the streets. And this shows that, of course, the public space has completely different rules. And if you go into a shopping mall or on a fair, you know that you are confronted with brands. But in the public space, it is not usual that everywhere is a branding. Here is, I would say, some of the most important things of the public space. So, of course, the context, the urban intervention, change of perspective, surprise, storytelling plays a very big role if you want to really create a good, how can I say, urban media art project. Some cooperation models which already function and maybe they are a kind of exception. Of course, art and technology, this is always a very good combination. We had it with the project of Julius von Bismarck in 2008. It is a detecting software that was developed those times by the Fraunhofer Society, and the software could, show the emotion of the people. So if I take a photo of you now, and I have the software on my computer, I could immediately see what is the dominating emotion. There are still 4 emotions: surprise, anger, sadness, and happiness. And out of this information, the artist took photos of where a lot of people met, and via live stream they sent the most dominating emotion to this media facade or to the screen, and it was visualized through an animated smiley. So the smiley was smiling or it was sad, and with the sentence, how does Schöneberg or Kreuzberg feel today? This was a very good cooperation between art and technology and Fraunhofer Society. Of course, they were very interested that how can I say, somehow invisible technology gets visible in another scenario. And also an example from Luzano Hemmer, what he did at the Federation Square, solar equitation. He presented there a huge sun, and the people could create the surface of the sun, and so through an app. And this app was available on an iPhone, so it was a campaign of Apple. But it was a campaign where why I was writing is a brand was catalyzing an urban media art project and not vice versa. It was not that an urban media art project catalyzes a brand. And Yeah, and so there are lots of other kind of examples. Science and technology, of course, is also extremely interesting. Here is a science media-facade in Berlin, which is of the Leibniz Institute. Really complicated physical processes have been visualized together with Pfadfinderei, who is a VJ team, and which are now available for everybody and try to communicate the complexity of the physics. And a last example, of course, is social corporate responsibilities. I think this is something in which direction we maybe all should go in future times, to really use it for kind of missions, for good missions. In this case, it was the Green World campaign. What happened here, you could plant a tree, and while sending an SMS, here it is called text-to-give software, which means you have been dialing a phone number, and then this number, what you have been dialing, immediately in real time there was growing a tree, and which was symbolizes that the tree, of course, was planted somewhere else. So the difficulty, the different eyes, and the difference, what we see, of course, if you have on one side the campaigns and on other side the artistic scenarios, are the wording. So there are really two worlds of different values. On the one hand, you have the consumer, the customer, the buyer, the client, and on the other hand, you have the citizen, the participants, inhabitant, visitor, and all these words what we are using when we talk about artistic scenarios, but also the target group. The companies talk about target groups, culture people talk about audience development or communities, and of course, campaigns are always profit-oriented, while artistic scenarios very often have a mission and are process-oriented, so they very often are open. And on the other hand, if you work with advertisement, very often it's standard. So they are not so open for a process. They want to see what they have been conceived at the very beginning. So at this point, yes, I would say let's have this little discussion now. Here are some upcoming Connecting Cities events to which, of course, we would like to invite you. There is a lab in Brussels in the moment. Then, of course, you are warmly invited to Ars Electronica and also to a European conference with the European Capitals of Culture and the Media Architecture Biennial in Aarhus, where a lot of experts and universities from all over the world are coming. And here are all the further information. Thank you very much.
Здравствуйте. Будут ли у вас какие-либо проекты в Москве или в России?
Yes, of course. Okay, thank you. Not yet. It always takes a while, of course, if we collaborate with a city, like normally you are invited to talks like here, and then you start to meet people, and yes, and the best, of course, is if it's a cultural institution that has a nice projection wall or an integrated media facade, or are interested in this whole project. And yes, and then, of course, we start to include them, and they become part of this Connecting Cities network, where there are, regular meetings and exchange on a certain level their knowledge.
Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, you talked a lot about participatory design and the public space. I was wondering about democratization of those big screens. If there have been projects about where there is a framework for where people can connect, where people can do their own stuff, and then, for example, the public can vote about it, can say, okay, we want to see this one more often. We don't want to see this one. Now it seems to me a very elitary approach where it's somebody decides what is shown, but the public itself is not really integrated in that process. So
it's a very nice question. I remember in 2002 I was selecting a lot of media projects in public space. And there was, unfortunately, one vision but not realized that exactly had this idea to cover a huge facade with slots. And in every slot, you, a citizen, could book and put its own video. So basically the idea of a very democratic like facade, he imagined some ideas how to prevent abuse, that one person is always putting its own videos, but it was just a vision, and it is simply for the fact very hard to realize because the people are very afraid of bad content. So also if you try to work as an artist with a participatory process, let's say, even if it's not let's say a commercial facade, but if it's a temporary facade made by cultural institutions, there are many parties who have to say something, like the city government. You have to go through a lot of permissions to put up, because you are in public space, and public space is a place that is it's not totally free like we would love to have it. And unfortunately, we also, or our city government cannot trust our self-regulation. So very often, like I remember Raphael Lozano-Hammer wanted to make at Potsdamer Platz this art project where he basically has a system that creates questions out of words, and people can add words, and but they ask him, please take out the word Jew, because very site-specific. In Berlin, the city government was afraid that maybe some strange question appears with including the word Jew. So it's, of course, on the one hand, there is a big issue that the biggest media facades are very often commercially owned. But even if it is facade that is owned by cultural institutions, there's a big fear of inappropriate content if you keep it open for public submissions, or of, let's say, boring content. So so I remember, like at Federation Square, there was the Institute for Moving Image, and they didn't like to use this public screen because they were very afraid to put their high-profile content in between content from the citizens. On this screen, you, for example, could send an SMS and then it appears there, or connected to a picture. So the cultural institutions sometimes are afraid of the profane things that might be put like you see in YouTube sometimes.
Еще раз здравствуйте. С чего вы начинали? Как вы раскручивали свои проекты и как убедить администрацию городов дать вам зеленый свет, чтобы вы могли это делать?
Okay, maybe. Yes, good question. So I can already show this book. As Mirjam said, and as an urban planner, of course, she knows more if it comes to the question of permissions with this medium. Yes, if you want to convince the authorities or also convince media facades holders, I think the most important is always to start an interdisciplinary dialogue. Actually, so we really invited them, we called it at those times round tables, and brought together those who are important in this whole field. And these were on one hand the infrastructure, the media facades screens holders. Then we invited the content, those people who develop and create content in the city. We also invited TV and theater directors, not only artists, this because, yes, content provider is really a broad field, and we wanted to bring them all together. Then, of course, the city planners, city marketing, and cross-media marketing. And with these, starting from these round tables, we had a discussion, and then also with expert workshops, we went into much deeper into this whole field, and but we included them from the very beginning. I think this is really important to include them, because it is a field with a how can I say, with this complex interaction field, and if you don't include them, then you really will have difficulties. And yeah, we had the chance actually that we made an innovation forum in Germany, in Berlin, together with the Ministry of Science and Education. This publication came out of it, what we really would like to give you as a present to the Strelka Institute. Of course, it's also available online, and a handbook where the different opinions and the different attitudes, everybody has a certain attitude to this medium, came together. And this is also how we still see it, that it's, this medium only has a future if it's a cooperation model, and if it becomes a medium for all the involved stakeholders.
And then I think you have to see this whole discourse as part of the art project. So you have to see the discussion, for example, the discussion around censorship as a part of the art project, to try to convince. And sometimes in the process you're even surprised, like with the O2 world, they were at all not really looking at what the artists are putting on there, while in some other experiences the city government was more strict. So it's very much about experimentation, about starting and seeing how you can get through the ideas that you want to. And then, of course, there's always the tool of guerrilla style actions. And with the projectors becoming more and more bright, you can do smaller interventions where you can, let's say, be less dependent on big expensive infrastructure, and maybe also independent from some permission if you're clever.
Извините, можно еще один вопрос? Как вы считаете, возможно ли такие мероприятия в Москве создать? И будет ли это проще или сложнее, чем вы это делали в Германии и Берлине?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not the Moscow expert, but of course you have already. There was at least this City Vision Festival, what Mirjam mentioned years ago. Then, of course, there is this really wonderful newsletter, screens.ru. I met also these two people who are running it, and this is one of the best newsletter that is created. I don't know whether it's created in Moscow, but at least it's created in Russia. And yes, and I don't know so far how the government is working here, but I can imagine what people tell me about Moscow, that there is really a new scene coming up, and that the city cares for their young cultural people, and that it's not only so getting, I would say, in the West, it's not only the Western style that is dominating. And maybe out of this discussions, I can imagine it's new. For them, it's also a kind of visibility. It's a young medium. I can imagine that you can find there someone in the government who is interested to collaborate.
I mean, it's interesting to look at the website of the Screens.ru. There was this, just this year, actually in 2014, you see on the website, they have again an article about art, media art, and screens. And then, if you look in 2012, there were a few articles. Of course, you have to know it's the point of view of the people who are on the market side. So, of course, they complain a little bit that the mayor seems to have changed a bit the direction, and now there is a much more strict rules for advertisement in Moscow. But actually, this can be a chance to maybe approach them and ask them, yeah, you know, actually these screens on the poles are quite ugly, but can't we find together more creative ways or a new way where you can, of course, you have other ways of cultural sponsorship that can be, let's say, a bit more culturally appropriate than all these ugly pole screens with boring advertisement on them.
Hello. As you mentioned the role of brands as well, I just remember that. Can I sit down? I just don't like to stand up. Yeah, so that I think last year or the year before, Mercedes had this advertisement. I don't know if you seen it, that they basically, what they did, they didn't project a car on a big facade, but they actually covered the car with a kind of kinetic cover. And then it was the zero emission. I don't know which car was it, but basically what they wanted to advertise is that it had zero emission and the car was invisible because they covered it with this kinetic cover. So when the car was moving on the streets, people actually could see themselves, so it reflected their bodies. And as you mentioned, the most important points of urban and public projections, I think they managed to combine lots of them. So it was interactive. Besides having the brand communication, they also had this social responsibility too. So I don't know if you have any partners or any cooperation with brands, or you're planning to have, or which are those brands that you would call, okay, they are into innovative creation, or with whom you would cooperate, or are there any at all?
Okay, I answer here. Yes, as I said, we have partners who are more from the technological field. So, because how can I say, the technology is shown in a different way. So these partners are existing, but no, so far we hadn't any really big brand as partner. I think it has to do that you need a certain confidence, and we have been approached by companies. It's not that there is not any interest, but you have to start. How can I say? They always come in such a late, hectic moment when they just want the logos. The campaign, everything is ready, and it's just the implementation in the public space. So you should start much more earlier this discussion and already show possibilities that it will not lead only to this logo. And so these were companies who approached us, but for campaigns that should happen in 4 weeks. And so therefore we did not work together with them. This would be completely against the mission what we built up so far. But what we can imagine is to start from point zero to develop something. And this is actually what we are now close together with a brand, how can I say, brand architecture agency, which we know for a long time. And yes, and we often invited each other to conferences, and maybe there is something or a client where it works, but it should be a good showcase. And in the moment there is not any hurry, I would say. So.
And then, of course, for let's say a cultural body or a cultural institute, it's a big tightrope walk. for every artist. I remember we were, after the Media-facades and Festival, we were invited by this, let's say, the Festival of Lights in in Berlin, which is really coming from a very, very commercial entertainment direction. And they asked us, don't you want to be part of and make our festival more beautiful and increase our quality? And for us, it was really a decision. And finally, we decided not to take this offer because we were in danger that we lose our reputation in the art field, because at that time, I mean, the quality of their light, I don't know how you can call it, was really not up to standard. Very, very sad actually for getting so much attention. So this is always a very difficult line where to go. That's, of course, every art institution prefers to try to get sponsorship through public grants or through let's say, try to find like a technology sponsor that is already happy if we use the technology and put the logo, of course, in the communication, but who doesn't want to influence too much into a project, because that's the danger that if art field and advertisement field is crossing too much over, we should have two names. One name, like artists often do, one name for doing the art projects and the other name for earning the money, because of course also artists need money.
There is one smart concept what was presented by Urban Screen. Urban Screen, they are one of the first artist group who started with mappings, and they were creating very interesting mappings because all these mappings had a very architectural relationship to the place and to the architecture, and their idea was, and how they also try to educate their clients as they also work commercially, is that you just show the whole mapping and then at the very end you say presented by. But don't start with this at the beginning, but do it at the very end, so that the whole storytelling already happened. The people understood the story, find it interesting, and are happy that someone presented by, like the weather in TV, you see the weather, and then it's presented by a bank or whatever. So this, I found a good solution, and they are also strong enough to educate the companies in this way. Yeah, so in this direction, of course, you can think, but both sides have to work and approach each other with their different worlds of value.
One more question.
Thanks. I found it very interesting what you just said before about the artist needs money and brands need money as well. I mean, until even now, we still have television where we cannot choose what is actually shown on the TV, or slowly it starts that we can actually choose the program or TV shows or whatever at any time. But it's like, I see some kind of tendency that we are going to show because we want them to see that. To the public, but I think we should think about it as well. That what do they want to see? Do they really want to see that? Should we not give them a medium that they can choose?
I mean, this is a very interesting discussion. Like, what do the people want to see? And of course it's not so easy, because we are living in a I would say advertisement society. So very often I believe we can't actually really know what we want. We are very often in a subtle way we are told what we want. So very difficult to question how do we actually go back to knowing what we want, and if we are there, we can choose. If I would do now an open art project, I believe the people in our cities, they're already so influenced by our let's say media society, our brand society, that I believe often we don't know anymore what we really need and what we really want. So it's a big question. How do we find again what do we want to see really, and what do we need in our cities?
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Владимир. Я хотел бы задать вам вопрос. Вы планируете вообще развивать проекты в городе Москва?
I think we should do something in Moscow together with you who are here. If there is any interest, you are really welcome. And it's the second time that I was here. Mirjam is the first time. It's a huge city and a beautiful city. And you have a lot of expensive brands here. And yes, so far not.
Хорошо. Спасибо большое.
Maybe Strelka Institute can join the network, huh?
Sorry. Hello. You said it's a very difficult question. What do people want? But my question is, what you dreaming about? What are you dreaming about? And you as an architect, as I understood, from your background, do you think that media facade could become such an architectural tool, for example? And what do you think we will have in future? What are you dreaming about this? Could it become a city full of such temporary content? Could it be maybe architectural style or something like that? Or it will be like additional reality and which will transform in special stuff like Google Glass or something like that, and we will have just clean cities, clean walls without any media stuff. What do you think?
Shall I start, or you? So I come from Berlin, and Berlin was, when the wall fell, a huge construction site with a lot of empty spaces in the city. And maybe you have seen pictures from those times. Of course, there was party everywhere, and a lot of things were possible because everything was cheap. And and people invented themselves every day in a new way. And it was open. There were a lot of possibilities, and I think this is of which we still dream of cities. When we dream of surprise, of adventure, of open processes, that things are possible, that there is a co-creation, that the people can participate in decision-making processes, and of course also this mixture of city and nature. Sometimes I would wish that there is also a farm within the city. Why is it on the countryside and not within the city? So to have a kind of city nature culture existing. These are things of which I really would wish. Of course, every real estate developer and every economic thinking person would now say, but that's really nice dreams. If the city is like this, how you describe it, then sooner or later it will become a city like Moscow or like Berlin. They are now all completely gentrified. I heard today, what was it? A one-room apartment at the last metro station in Moscow costs $1,000. So, wow. Crazy. And the same is also step by step happening now in Berlin, that these oases of fantasy, of open-minded, of freedom, that they are step by step getting so attractive to real estate companies. And when a city is bankrupt, like Berlin, then of course they sell these places because they get a lot of money out of them. And as they get a lot of money out of them, then they have to build high luxury apartments or high luxury offices. These are these typical city rules, economic city rules, what I think we all are completely against and hope that they can change. And and the only thing now, if I go now into again back to a positive vision, would be from the very positive vision with which I started, then back to this issue of media facades and projections and screens. I would love that there is an infrastructure that is not always visible. So therefore, I like very much how Montreal is doing it with these 10 projection walls within the city center. If it's off, you cannot see it. If it's on, you see wonderful art projects that you can really use them in the next step. So in the moment, we are all in this field of urban prototyping, experimenting, and so on. But in the future, of course, it would be also great to use them for real missions, so that all together, to use them as an urban communication format where the people have the possibility to participate, to really vote and co-create the content. And so this would be my wish, coming back to this. But I see Mirjam already, she's has a lot of other ideas or more ideas.
No. I mean, of course, I love this idea. As an urban planner, we learned citizens should participate in the shaping of the urban future. And of course, it would be lovely if these facade could be like let's say one tool, because we have to see the limits, like a media facade or a tool where people can express themselves. It's not enough. We learned a lot through little projects that process of real participation takes a lot of time and energy, and a lot of time also behind the final visual result that we see on the screen. And if we look at let's say also non-digital urban participatory processes, you realize very, very quickly that very often only few people are really let's say beyond just putting like on Facebook, engaging beyond, in dreaming, in thinking about what could be our city. Very few people are engaged in this. I personally work on a very, very small project to collectively turn our ugly backyard into a green roof. We have 200 inhabitants. And when we started the project, everybody liked on Facebook, like. But if we ask people, okay, who joins us to make some intervention on the roof to do something? Like 2 people wrote us and said, oh yes, here's our emails. So we realize it's a very long process of talking personally to the people, like explaining them. Even we get very often the reply like, I'm not a gardener, so what can I do? So you need to imagine people are in their everyday routine. So to become creative and to have visions and dreams, you need a special atmosphere, a special surrounding that takes you out of the everyday routine, watching TV or whatever. And it's a long process, which unfortunately often in a festival, I feel even we have not enough time, because 1 month for an artist trying to really involve people is very, very short.
Еще есть вопросы? Все, тогда спасибо. Thank you very much for your